Bless your holy, 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 wonderful, glorious name. Hallelujah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Probably said it a dozen times, but you remember it was kind of funny, but it was good too. I was in my early 20s, maybe 21, something like that, up in North Carolina, living up there, and having a church and working in the bus ministry and working a job, doing all the things. And I remember we brought some in out of the mountains, and we was right on the verge of the Blue Ridge Mountains, Mount Airy, where Andy Griffith's from. That's Mayberry. Mount Airy's Mayberry. And we'd go up into Virginia. We was about 20 miles from the Virginia line. Go over to Hillsville and Cana, Virginia, and all those places. Way back up in there. And I got a rude awakening. You know, I'm from South Georgia, and I thought we were country, but we'd go back up on bus visitation, and we'd park the car, and we'd walk up gravel roads to houses that were log cabins, and you'd come to places, and the guy said, well, let's just stop right here. I said, well, if the house is on up there. He said, yeah, but you don't do that. He said, you holler and let them know you're coming. And I said, well, why you do that? He said, well, now they're raising shine up here, and they don't want nobody to walk in on them. And so that's what you had to do. We brought a boy in, and he was barefoot, wore overalls, about like Doug, but Doug does have shoes, so I thank the Lord for that. But come in, and so I remember we was having a service where everybody was just thanking God, thanking God, thanking God for everything. And the old boy stood up, and I knew he didn't have anything. I mean, honestly, he didn't have anything, because I knew when we went up there, it was a pitiful house that he lived in. And so he stood up, and I thought, what in the world does he have to be grateful for and thankful for? And I remember him just looking up with tears streaming down his face, and he lifted his hands. They were just quivering like that. And for about 5 minutes, he just repeated a word over and over again. 2 words. He said, much obliged. Yeah. Much obliged. Much obliged. Yes. That's just his way of saying thank you. Yes. Thank you to the Lord. And so you may not have everything somebody else has, but you've got more than you deserve. That's right. Yeah. We all do that, and so we've got so much to be thankful for. Romans chapter number 4. Romans chapter number 4. Just read a couple of verses to kind of set the platform and the stage, and on which I believe the Lord wants me to say a word or two this morning. Romans chapter 4, verse 17. Romans 4 is written to tell us how Old Testament saints got saved by the grace of God. They were justified by faith in the shed blood, just like we are. And he uses Abraham as a wonderful example of that. But then in the middle of talking about how Abraham got right with God, and it was right in the sight of God, he gives illustration of the birth of Isaac and the life of Abraham and Sarah. Verse number 17, as it is written, I have made thee a father of many nations before him whom he believed, even God, who quickeneth the dead and calleth those things which be not as though they were. You may not understand that, but thank God he's calling those things which be not as though they were, who against hope believed in hope. Here's Abraham. He's 75, she's 65. When the promise is given, time the promise gets here, he's 100, she's 90. And so it's against hope. There's no rational reason to believe that anything could happen. But he's just trusting God that he might become the father of many nations according to that which was spoken. So shall thy seed be. And being not weak in faith, he considered not his own body now dead when he was about 100 years old, neither yet the deadness of Sarah's womb. I like this, he staggered not, meaning he didn't waver, he didn't back up, he didn't doubt. He staggered not at the promise of God through unbelief, but was strong in faith, giving glory to God. And here's our verse, and being fully persuaded that what he, that's God, had promised, he, God, was able also to perform. The thought this morning is he will do just exactly what he said he will do. Do you see Abraham? He's finally running to the mailbox. He's got that first Social Security check come in. He's 65. He runs back to the house, or maybe walks at a fast pace back to the tent door and says, "Look here, Sarah, what we got." And she gets up and says, "You know what? I can't hardly get out of this walker anymore. My back's just killing me." Abraham says, "My legs are bothering me." And she said, "Well, my bursitis is giving me fits today." He said, "Oh, the arthritis is just killing me today." And about that time, a voice outside the tent door comes and said, "Abraham and Sarah." And Abraham knew that voice. It wasn't the first time that voice had showed up in the life of Abraham. And Abraham looked at Sarah and said, "That's the Lord. I wonder why he's come by for a visit today. Maybe he's going to tell us new directions for our life, or maybe he's got something in store for us." And so Abraham goes out. Sarah lingers behind, and God looks at Abraham and says, "How you feeling today?" He said, "Well, Lord, I'm moving a little slow. You know, when you get my age, you're just not what you used to be." And God said, "Well," he says, "I understand that." He said, "But I got some good news for you." And Abraham said, "Well, what in the world is it, Lord? Do you have another place you want me to pull up the tent stakes and move to?" He said, "No, I got news for you and Sarah." He said, "I'm going to do something special for you. Y'all going to be a daddy, and you're going to be a mama." I can see the mouth of Abraham drop open wide. I can see Sarah, she's giggling behind the tent door and laughing. Abraham laughs at the promise of God, and Sarah laughs at the promise of God. But God got the last laugh, and I promise you, God always will get the last laugh. Yeah. God gave him a promise, and I want to say this: God will do exactly what he said he will do. He'll do it in spite of the delays that he sends. Now, it would be nice if God told Abraham, "Y'all going to have a youngin'," and 9 months later a bouncing baby boy comes on the scene. But it was 25 long years before it occurred. When you take a promise from God's holy word that God has burned in your heart, I promise you God will do exactly what God has promised to do in spite of the delays that he may send. Then God will do exactly what he said he would do in spite of the detours that God will send. I find it amazing that God talks about how strong Abraham is in faith. I find it strange in Hebrews 11. God talks about Sarah and how strong she was in faith. I want to say, Lord, have you forgotten Genesis 16? When Abraham tried to decide to help you out a little bit. And so Hagar was brought, and they had a child by the name of Ishmael trying to help God out. Let me tell you something. God is not so feeble, and God is not so weak that God needs me and you to help him out. If God said he will do it, he will do it when he gets ready to do it. Someone said and gave this chronology. What do you reckon happened in those 25 years from the time that God gave the promise to Abraham until Isaac was born? Somebody said it might have been something like this. At age 76, Abraham goes out and buys a crib. At the age of 78, they make a list of all the possible boy names that are available. At age 80, they go to the store and they order a supply of super absorbent Pampers. Because they figure when the baby comes, and can't you see when the baby finally does come and that little thing's running around out there and he enters the terrible twos. Abraham's over 100. And Sarah says, "Isn't this a mess? 3 of us in diapers at the same time." At the age of 85, Abraham goes hunting while Sarah's friends give her a baby shower. At the age of 86, they put up wallpaper in the baby's room. At the age of 90, they subscribe to a New Parents magazine. At age 93, he and Sarah start Lamaze classes. At age 96, they have a practice drive and run to the hospital. At the age of 98, he packs a suitcase and sits in beside the tent door. At the age of 99, he scratches his head and wonders if God was playing a joke on him the whole time.
Now you say, what happened? It's 25 long, dry, difficult years from the time that God said he would do it until God actually did it. Abraham's story is a faith story. So is my story, and so is yours. His faith was tested, as I said, by delays. His faith was tested by detours. His faith was tested by his doubts on occasion. Someone said, a faith that cannot be tested cannot be trusted. Someone else said, faith is like film. It develops best in the dark, through the storms and the trials of life. Abraham had a faith that would not falter and that would not fail. It's interesting in studying the life of Abraham to see how God develops him and God matures him, and he gets closer to God as he takes steps of faith. You will find 4 different areas in which Abraham began to grow in faith. In Genesis 12, when God found him in the Ur of the Chaldees and told him to sell out lock, stock, and barrel and go to a land he never saw, you find Abraham taking the first step of faith. He is leaving all for God. In Genesis 13, you find him leaving all with God, with him. And you find they're out there on the plains, and Lot are beginning to argue. And finally he says, God, I'm going to put it in your hands. Do what you want. Then you find a little bit later on in Genesis 15, he is finding all in God when the Lord shows up and says, I will be thy shield, Abraham, and thy exceeding great reward. And then in Genesis 22, when he's to offer Isaac on the land at Mount Moriah, you find him yielding all to God. The Bible says much about faith. Faith is not just faith in faith, it's faith in a person. And our faith is in the Lord Jesus. Our faith is in God. Our faith is in the Bible. Our faith is in the promises of God. Somebody said you Christians are delusional. You're living in a delusional world. You're living in a fantasy society. No, I am not. My faith is not in me. My faith is not in you. My faith is not in the church. My faith is entirely on the one who sits on the throne of eternity, the mighty God of the ages, the one who saved us, the one who keeps us, the one who blesses us, the one who has sealed us unto the day of redemption, the one that was born in Bethlehem, the one that lived a virtuous life, the one that died a vicarious death, the one that got up on the Sunday morning for victorious resurrection, and the one who is soon to return for me and you. That's who my faith and my confidence and my hope is based in. In Mark chapter 11 and verse number 22, we're told to have faith in God. Romans 14, Paul tells us that if we do anything that's not of faith, it is sin. We are to walk not by sight, but we are to walk by faith. Without faith, we are told in the book of Hebrews, in the great faith chapter number 11, we are told that without faith, it is impossible to please God. On one occasion, the Lord Jesus told the people of that area, the reason that I cannot do any miracles or mighty works here is because of your unbelief. In Luke 17, the disciples asked him in verse number 5, Lord, would you increase our faith? And so you and I, once we're born again, once we're in the family of God, once we're on this journey, it's a journey of faith. Faith is believing God when you don't know how. Faith is believing God when you don't know why. Faith is believing God when you don't know what. Faith is believing God when you don't know where. And faith is believing God when you don't know when. Right. That's right. Illustration of this was, there's a book that you can't get anymore because it's out of print. You did get it, it'd be a $300 book, entitled A Race for God, and it's the life story that Brother Estes Perkle wrote about Dr. Percy Ray from Myrtle, Mississippi. I mean, it's an interesting book, very interesting. It's like reading the book of Acts all over again. And one of the stories in there illustrates faith very well. Early on in his ministry, Dr. Ray had a tent and would set the tent up in small towns or either go to churches in the small towns and in that area of Mississippi or up in Tennessee. And so there was a little town called Selma, Tennessee. It was a bootlegging town in those days, and not very many people. A small church was there, and a community store was there, a farming community, a rural community. And so Dr. Ray went to preach and said, if God moves in, we'll set the tent up and we'll see what the Lord's going to do. And so they had a week of meeting in the church, and nothing really happened. And Dr. Ray said, Lord, you're going to have to do something. These people are hard. These people are hard-hearted. These people could care less about God. You've got to show them that you're real in your life. At that time, that community in that area was experiencing a drought. And the drought was an extended drought. And there was no irrigation units at that time. And so if you didn't get rain, the crops didn't grow. And the crops didn't grow, you didn't make a crop, or you didn't get paid. And so it was devastating to farmers, and that was a farming community. And so an old deacon, he had whiskers, long whiskers coming down, and looked like one of those veterans from the Civil War that you see pictures of. And he came to Dr. Ray and said, Dr. Ray, he said, we got to have rain around here. He said, I believe if God sent rain, I believe we wouldn't just have physical rain, we'd have spiritual rain, we'd have revival. And so Dr. Ray said, well, I've got to go back to Myrtle, Mississippi. I'll be back in a few days. And he said, y'all pray about that. And so the next morning, this old man is walking down the dusty road and walks by the little country store. And you've got the spit and whittle crowd. You know what that is? That's the guys who are chewing tobacco and whittling. And they're sitting there on the front porch doing that. And here's the old man coming by. But he's not coming by like he normally comes by. He comes by with a raincoat on. He comes by with rubber knee boots on. He comes by with a rain hat on. And he comes by toting an umbrella. And so they're looking at him. If you've ever been to a country store and you've ever seen the guys playing checkers there, you know they can be a little bit on the sarcastic side. And so they look at him and say, hey, Grandpa, what's going? You missed your medication this morning. You're going plumb crazy. The sun doesn't beat down upon you. What you doing? He said, I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm about to go to church and pray for rain. And they said, you crazy old rascal. They said, there's not a sign in the sky. He said, the broadcast and the forecast is not for rain. He said, it's not going to happen. He said, well, I'm going to pray about it. And so he did that. Finally, about the third day, he walks by and they give him a hard time. And he said, I want to tell you boys something. He said, not only is God going to send rain, God's going to do it today. Well, that's about as much as they could take. They doubled over laughing. Some of them swallowed the tobacco juice and turned green. The checkerboard was turned over and they were laughing and cutting up and said, get on out of here, old man. You done gone completely crazy. Well, that morning when he came down the road, not only did he come, but his little granddaughter came with him. She had been watching her granddaddy every day, and she finally come to him the day before and said, Grandpa, I see you every morning getting up, and you put a raincoat on, you put the rubber boots on, you get an umbrella, and you put a cap on your head. What in the world you doing? He said, baby, I'm praying for rain. I'm praying that God will do a miracle and send rain. And so the next morning he gets, and she said, Grandpa, I want to go with you. So she come in, and she had a raincoat on, and she's going down there with him. And so they get down there, and he goes to the old wooden building, and he goes to the corner over there and sticks his nose in the corner of that old rustic wooden building church and prays and prays and prays. And somebody went to the back door, one of that crowd went to the back door and picked in and said, yeah, he's still praying. And hollered back to the boys, he's still praying. And so he prays and prays and prays. And the granddaughter come and she tugged and she said, Grandpa, do you think God's going to do it? He said, baby, he's going to do it. And about that time, there's a little thunder in the distance. About that time, the boys went out and said, you know what? It's looking a little dark over there. Well, less than an hour, it so rained that fields were flooded out. And he had to tow his granddaughter back because water was running down the gully up to there. And the next week the tent was set up, and I'll tell the story some other time what God did. But God did an amazing thing. And you say, why? Because you had an old man, an old deacon in the church. He wasn't a preacher. He wasn't called to the ministry. He was just a child of God that believed God enough, that he believed God more than he believed the boys, and more than he believed the weather forecast, and more than he believed what he could see. And he put his faith and trust not in the weatherman, but in God. And God did something amazing. And I'm going to tell you, I don't think he's the God of yesterday. I don't think he's the God of the 20s and 30s. I think he's an up-to-date God. And I believe what he has done, he still can do and still will do. And I think if you need rain, you need a blessing, you need finances, you need help, whatever you need, if you pray and believe and trust and persevere and not give up and latch hold to the horns of the altar and with faith shake heaven, I believe God can and will do exactly, just exactly what he said he'll do.
Amen.
Three thoughts quickly. Notice how Abraham's faith was tested. It's one thing for God to say, I'm going to do it, and you see it by the end of the service. It's one thing for God to say it, you see it by the end of the week. It's one thing for God to say it, you see it by the end of the month or the end of the year. But I want to tell you, it's 25 years. God's going to test the faith of Abraham. You'll find back to chapter 13 all the way through, God shows up time and time again. Not just one time, but he says, you remember what I told you? You're going to have descendants like the stars of the heaven, like the sand upon the seashore. You're going to have descendants like that. You're going to be blessed. And God continually all the way through begins to tell him and remind him of what he's to do. Abraham's faith is tested. Now if Abraham's faith faltered, here's what I like. And I want to emphasize this just for a minute, then I'll move on because I don't have much time. But here's what I like. God talks how strong Abraham's faith is. And yet when you read Genesis chapter 16, you find Abraham blows it big time. Now God said that he was going to sin. So maybe, we don't know the time period, maybe a year passes, 2 year passes, 5 year passes. But anyway, Sarah gets a bright idea. And Sarah says this. Now can you imagine a woman saying this? She says, you need another wife. Has she lost her ever-loving mind? You need another wife. We got to, let's bring our servant in, and you can go in with her, and then the offspring. Maybe the Lord didn't understand just how old I am and how I feel. Maybe the Lord didn't look at our medicine cabinet and see all the medicine up there. So let's help God out. And so they try to help God out, and from that comes Ishmael. And you know what that's doing right now? They're fighting in the Middle East, and they've been fighting ever since, because you got Isaac the Jew, Ishmael, the Palestinians, and the rest of the crowd over there, and they've been battling ever since, flesh and spirit. And so he tries to help Abraham. Abraham tries to help God out. Sarah tries to help God out. And yet the Lord, when talking about them, says, man, Abraham, he said, what this? I looked in Hebrews 11, my name's not there. I didn't see yours there. I didn't see Elijah's name there. I didn't even see Elijah's name. I didn't see that. But what I saw was Sarah. I saw Abraham. I see what God says of Abraham. He was fully persuaded. Man, he is sticking in there. And yet the mess he makes. Aren't you glad that the Lord can look on our life? And God doesn't sweep sin aside. And God doesn't ignore wrongdoing. But God is a gracious and kind God. And when he saw the life of Abraham, he saw it basically as a life of faith. And so God didn't harp upon, I don't know if God's even Baptist or not. God didn't harp upon the one mistake that Abraham and Sarah made. You can serve God for 190 years and blow it one time, and I'll tell you what Baptists will do, they'll pick out that one time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And they'll say, well, Dewey is great. You've served God for 798 years, but 432 years ago on that Friday afternoon, I noticed a few things about you. Not God. God just says about them, they had faith, But God tested their faith. And I tell you what the Lord will do. He'll give us faith, but he'll test our faith. And the way he tests faith is for what you want to occur, not when you want it to occur. I pull up and go through the drive-thru at the bank. And if they ignore me, I did this one time. I pull up and I'm getting medicine. You ought to go. We're dope dealers at the house, I guess. I don't know. We have 95 different medicines there. I don't know what in the world's going on. Report us, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, so I pull up to get medicine. And they're walking by the window. And I'm sitting out there. And I'm thinking, am I invisible? I mean, do I have the cloak of invisibility? Am I a superhero? Do they not see me? I mean, they're walking beside, and every now and then I do this and keep on walking. You know what I did? How dare they do that to me? I'm impatient. Oh, y'all look so past. You bunch of hypocrites. You're looking so past. I never would do that. No, I never would do that.
I'll let them. Hey!
It'd be hard to miss you, Doug.
But I'm impatient, and we're all impatient. We live in a world of things that occur immediately. We can get on the phone, the internet, and we find things out within seconds that used to take hours or days to figure out. So we have the mindset that everything has to occur instantly. We're a microwave Christianity. We stick it in 30 seconds, it needs to be done. But God hasn't quite made it up to our time period. And God's not in a microwave Christianity. And what the Lord will do is test your faith. Now, the reason Dylan is here, among other reasons, was that after we got married older in life, and we couldn't have children. The doctor said we couldn't have children, and it wasn't possible. But still wasn't going to happen. So Diane gets burdened, and she fasted for that. Now, I can't remember how long it was, but it wasn't the next day. It wasn't a long period, but it wasn't the next day that it happened. And I noticed this. There's been times that God has burdened me over the years to really believe God for something. And sometimes he has burdened me to fast or really to seek his face or go that extra mile beyond what you normally do because you're burdened about something. I was talking to a preacher friend yesterday, and me and him a while back, he just said to me, he said, let's take next Wednesday and fast to after church, and I'll fast for you and your burdens, and you share them with me. And then he shared his burdens, and so we did that. And I want to tell you, it was the hardest day. I mean, I have fasted much longer in my life, but he said the same thing. That was the hardest day. Not only did you have the headaches that you normally have with fasting because of caffeine and sugar and all that, but I mean, it was just a struggle. And I tried to pray that day. And honestly, I felt that my prayers didn't get to that ceiling, didn't get to that wall. And for them to get out, I had to open the door to get them out. That's how ineffective I felt that day. But I made it till the end of the service that night and went back home and got something to eat. But it wasn't very long. Within the next week, God did. And in fact, I told him, I think it was the next Wednesday night I preached, and I never have had liberty like I did that Wednesday night on the burnt altar. When I preached on that, it was just tremendous. I mean, God just was flowing out of that. And I texted him, and I said, I don't know what happened. He said, man, God helped me tonight. But it didn't happen immediately, and when we were going through it, it didn't seem like, and honestly, I felt like that day throwing my hands up and going and getting a cheeseburger. Because it didn't seem like nothing was happening. Many times God will test your faith. And don't give up when God's testing your faith. And don't quit when God's testing your faith. And don't get mad with God when He's testing your faith. Because God, see, here's the big thing, and I don't know how far I'm going to get with this, probably not any further than this. But the reason God is testing Abraham's faith about the birth of Isaac is because there's going to be a trial down the road when Isaac gets here. Because when Isaac is a grown man, God's going to say, part 2 of the trial, you remember how I made you wait for him to get here? Now I want you to kill him and offer him on an altar. Now you think about this. It's not just one thing of ending somebody's life. Have you ever seen an animal? Have you ever heard it depicted how an animal was offered for sacrifice? How they would split them open and how they would fillet them and how they would take the parts of them and lay that out on the altar. And now God is telling Abraham to do that. And so that's why God tests his faith early on, because God knows Abraham is going to need it when he gets to that next trial. So you and I, many times, instead of trying to push the fast forward button with God and say, Lord, we was on the video chat the other night, and I did something I never done before. Some of the guys tell me that you can push the fast forward and you can do that. And so I was watching Dean the other night on there, and I did the fast forward on there, and it was just hilarious. You know, he was talking. But a lot of times we want to do the fast forward, and we want to say, God, let me fast forward through the next month, fast forward through the next 6 months, fast forward till you want to do something when you're going to do it. But you can't fast forward with God. And the reason you can't fast forward with God is because what's going to happen between now and when God does it, we're going to need that, because something's going to come down the road that we're going to need later on. So God tests his faith. Abraham's faith was tested. Secondly, Abraham's faith, I've been preaching, Sunday morning and finishing up Sunday night. I'm not doing that today. I'm going to finish this up this morning. You may have to be here to 3 o'clock, but I'm going to finish it up this morning. Abraham's faith was true. It was genuine. The Bible says he was fully persuaded. He didn't waver. He staggered not at the promise of God. The word stagger means he didn't back up. He didn't quit. He didn't lay down on the side. He didn't waver. He wasn't uncertain about it. He was deadly earnest about it. He was absolutely confident and certain that what God said he would do, he would do. And God knew that. That's why he tested his faith, because now you see that Abraham's faith is true. Look down to verse number 20 and 21, and that really it illustrates it well. Verse 18 says he against hope believed in hope. In verse 19, he didn't consider the weakness of his own body, even though he's 100 years old, nor the deadness of Sarah's womb, although she's 90. And verse 20, he staggers not the promise of God through unbelief, but he was strong in faith, giving glory to God. Verse 21, he was fully persuaded that what God had promised, God was able to do. Now, what kind of faith does he have? The Bible talks about little faith. The Bible talks about having strong faith. The Bible talks about having active faith. The Bible talks about having great faith. The Bible says that individuals can have no faith. The Bible speaks of a growing faith. The Bible warns of a shipwrecked faith. And the Bible talks about a victorious faith. Abraham's faith was well placed and well pleased. Abraham based his faith on the promise of God. Look back to verse number 17. As it is written, I have made thee a father of many nations. Then look on down to verse number 20. He staggered not to the promise of God. How was his faith so real? How was his faith so true? Why didn't he back up for 25 years? His faith rested in the promise of God. God said, I've already told you. I've already written it down. And you don't stagger. You've got the promise of God. It's not Abraham saying, Sarah, wouldn't it be wonderful for us to have a home and a family? Wouldn't it be wonderful for a little boy to run around here? Wouldn't it be good for us to have a legacy to leave behind? No, it was God's idea. And Abraham, when he doesn't feel good, he can say, Lord, I don't feel good. I don't think I can do it. But you promised. And so for 25 years, on good days and bad days, on high times and low times, through it all, his faith rested in the promise of God. I've got Philippians 4:19. I don't know every aspect of it, but I do know my God shall supply. And so I've got that promise. He didn't tell me when. He didn't tell me how. He didn't tell me when it was going to show up, who he would send it or how he would send it. But I do have the promise. And so what I do, my faith rests in the fact that I know God said he would take care of me. When he's going to do it, I don't know. How he's going to do it, I don't know. But through it all, I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to depend upon his word. And my faith rests in the promise of God.
Amen.
That's it.
My faith and his faith rested and required the power of God. In verse 21, and being fully persuaded of what he had promised, he was able also to perform. I've done this before, and I'll do it quickly, not belabor the point. But our oldest couple, Mr. Phil's not here, Miss Annette's here. He's 84, you're 82, I guess, 81, 82. My parents are 82. I would be highly surprised if my dad called me this afternoon and informed me that me and my brother were going to have an addition to the family. To say I would be highly surprised is a understatement. I would say, yeah, what have you been into? You might want to take a walk outside and get some fresh air and get the cobwebs out. Or if, next Sunday, they're here and all of a sudden, Miss Annette, this is just funny. This is just funny, okay? I'm laughing with you and at you. Just, hit me later or something, okay? Miss Annette, the hand goes up and I said, I'm thinking she's asking for Mr. Field or something, She said, hey, got news. Went to the doctor. We're expecting. And so we'd all be wanting to laugh, laughing inside, looking back at her. She's glowing. She's a mama to be. Well, we think we're crazy. Now, so here it is. God said it. And Abraham's told everybody for 25 years. Sarah's told everybody for 25 years. Can you imagine how many baby showers you can have in 25 years? Can you imagine this? One lady says, let's have a baby shower. We've had 40 of them already. How many more baby showers are we going to have? Well, we had that one 20 years ago and everything's done worn out by now. I mean, it don't look good, but Abraham's not wavering, not backing up. And so somebody says to him, he's 96, okay? And he got the promise at 75. They said, Abraham, hadn't you quit? Hadn't you give up? Just admit you were crazy. You didn't know what you were talking about. You just missed God. And Abraham, I could see him at 95, 96, 97, 98. I could see him say, I don't know when, I don't know how, but I tell you something, I'm not backing up. God said he would do it, and what God said he'll do just exactly what he said he'll do.
That's right.
And so his faith required the power of God. And many times when God does something special, that's what faith's going to require, the power of God. It's going to be something that you can't do. If it's something that I can do and you can do, it's not much faith anyway. And pray about the Jubilee meeting. If you've got something to give, we need some extra money on the thing. But here's the thing. Say that I pledge to give the Jubilee and I give what I know I can give. Okay? Well, that's good. That's wonderful. And that's a blessing. That's not faith. Because I know I can do that. But faith comes when I say I want to do something that I know I can do. Now, it's not being foolish about it, saying, okay, I'm going to give $1 billion, $1 million. But it's being realistic and it's trusting God and it's asking God to put it upon your heart. But faith is reaching out beyond what you normally are able to do and putting it in the hands of God and saying, Lord, here's my faith. It's in you. If it doesn't get done, Lord, and I can see Abraham. They say, Abraham, just admit it. You messed up. You blew it. You don't know what you were talking about. And here's what Abraham, I think, would say. Abraham says, my faith is not in me. He says, I know I'm too old to have a baby. My faith is not in Sarah. I know she's too old to have a baby. He said, but God said it. He said, the promise was given. And he said, my confidence is in God. He said, I don't know how, when, where, and all the other things. But he said, God said it. And I've got complete confidence that God is God. And beside him, there is none else. And so his faith required. But then his faith results in the glory of God. He gives God all the glory. I want to tell you, when finally throughout the community the word began to spread, and somebody said, hey, did you hear she's gone into labor? Her water has broken. No, Lord, I won't say that. That's something that just come across my mind. I'm going to pass on by that one. Her water's broken. She's in labor. And the midwife is there. And everybody's gathering outside the tent. Can you imagine how many people gathered outside because a 90-year-old woman is giving birth to a baby? And they're wondering, is she going to be strong enough to give birth?
will the baby, be all right? I mean, will it be mentally affected because of her age? And so they're wondering all that, and all of a sudden they hear that cry of that newborn baby, and they bring the baby out, and he's all cleaned off, and he's wrapped up, and they bring the baby out, and people are looking at the baby. And so what they're doing, they're Isaac, which his name is laughter. I give you Isaac. And you say, he's wonderful. You give him to Jean. And Jean says, that's great. And Jean gives him to Diane. And that baby begins to be passed around. That baby is faith personified. That's God's way of vindicating and doing exactly what he said. Can you imagine all those naysayers, all those people who said Abraham was crazy, that God wouldn't do it? Now they're looking at what God will do. Faith is tested, faith is true, and faith is triumphant. God will do just exactly what he said he will do. Now, obviously, I don't think I need a baby at this point in my life. If I do need one, then God had better give me a lot more strength and patience than I currently possess for the child to make it. I barely got through them two. So I don't think I need it. I'm pretty sure you don't need one. We've both been at home. If you need a baby, then you're going to have to find you a new husband. I wish y'all well on the endeavor. Amen. Give me an amen right there, boys. So I don't need a baby. There are things I do need. There are areas in my life I need God to do something special in. And I've got general promises from God that God's going to supply, that God will touch, God will heal. I've got general promises out there. Now, how God's going to do it, and like with Benny and things like that, sometimes the ultimate healing is just going to heaven. And God doesn't always heal like we want him, answer like we want him to answer or do that, but God knows what's best. And so I've got needs. And so what I have to do is take my faith and say, my faith is not in how I feel, because, man, I don't feel like it's going to happen. I don't look like it's going to happen. The circumstances don't seem to happen. I've got to look past my feelings and my circumstances and situations, and I've got to look to the promise of God. And God has laid that promise on my heart, so I put that confidence in God and say, God, it's entirely in your hands by faith. God, you may test my faith. It may be a while. Help my faith to be true, but in the end, the faith will be triumphant. But God's not done. A grown boy now, big and tall, or taller than Abraham. And God says to him now, you take him, you fillet him, dissect him, and you put him on the altar. No more cruel way to die than that. The Bible says it was a 3-day journey there. There's a good typology preaching there. He was 3 days there, 3 nights there. And in the mind of Abraham, he was dead from the moment they left. But God raised him up off that altar, and God did the same with Jesus. Nice enough, more preaching on that. But Isaac was good as dead. Here's what Abraham does. 3 days, Abraham's thinking, I've got to kill my boy. I've got to fillet him. I've got to lay him on the sacrificial altar. But when Abraham gets to the bottom of the mountain, he leaves the donkey and the servants there. He said, I'm going to take the wood. Me and the lad are going to go yonder and worship, and we'll return. Not just me, but we're coming back. Abraham didn't know how, didn't know when. Just like he didn't know how and when God told him they was going to have a baby boy. He didn't know how God was going to do it, but he knew the promise of God. And even though God said to kill him, Abraham knew he's coming back with that boy. His faith was that strong. And so Abraham gets up there, and the knife glistens in the noonday sun. And the angel of the Lord shows up. Now, who is that? That's Jesus in a pre-incarnate appearance. And Jesus shows up. And now Jesus is a shepherd, so, shepherds usually hang around sheep and lambs and goats and things like that. And so he shows up and said, whoa, Abraham, why, you was coming up this side of the mountain. Me and the ram was coming up the other side of the mountain. And I stuck him over there in the bushes, and I got his horns tangled up over there. You go and grab him, and you offer him.
And so there they come back down. And so the servants are down there. And they've heard the rumors. Abraham's going to offer Isaac. And then they know Abraham said he's going to come back with Isaac. They don't know what's going on. They said, is Abraham crazy? Man, what's going on? And so they see him go off. And they think, this is the last time we're going to see Isaac. But then they see him coming back. And maybe Abraham, now he's got to be 120, 130 by this time. I see him doing this all the way back down the mountain. Because he has found out one more time that he'll do just exactly what he said he will do. And it may not be a sacrifice, and it may not be 25 years of waiting, but whatever he's told you he'll do, and whatever the word says he will do just exactly what he said he'll do. You ever hit that?